you're like, oh, why don't they just do this? That's what the anti-hero does, is they go out and they do the thing.
I want to see some more people like make decisions that are not just I don't kill people.
It illuminates the fact that at the end of the day, many of the values that we actually hold for ourselves personally conflict with each other.
Hi, I'm Max.
I'm Drew.
And I'm Leisha.
Plot hole.
Said I'd write one chapter, wrote none.
I'm sorry, you do what?
I changed the ending again.
3 writers.
Countless blueprints.
Infinite stories. And now, into the story. Generally, what we understand of an anti-hero is that they're a central character who lack conventional heroic qualities. So a lot of heroic qualities that we immediately identify in some of our favorite heroes is honor, morality. Anti-heroes are often motivated by selfish goals. Sometimes they're motivated by revenge, survival, or just their own personal code. They're still usually protagonists, so we follow their story even though we don't always agree with them. So there's a lot that generally goes into what separates anti-heroes from villains as well as heroes, but there's also other things like, what does it mean to be an anti-hero versus just a morally gray protagonist? So we'll talk a little bit about those things as we kind of bring up certain things. So my first question for you guys is, why do you love anti-heroes?
You know what? I was trying to think of a good question to start us off. This is the exact same question I was thinking of. I think we can relate closer to anti-heroes than we can to plain old heroes and villains, because anti-heroes will do selfish things. I mean, heroes and villains will do selfish things, obviously, too, but, anti-heroes will do things that, whenever you're, nitpicking a movie and you're like, oh, why don't they just do this? That's what the anti-hero does, is they go out and they do the thing, because even if it's selfish, even if it's stupid, they'll do it because they want to do it. Doing the right things for the wrong reasons, wrong things for the right reasons, anything in between.
I love anti-heroes for all of those reasons. But specifically the last one where you said, why doesn't the hero just do this thing, and some moral compass thing, or some idealistic thing that they or trait that they have is holding them back from making those decisions. That's why I really love anti-heroes, and I actually wish that more people would let their heroes be anti-heroes. Maybe not even full anti-heroes, but just a little bit of an anti-hero. They can still be a good person and occasionally make questionable decisions. In fact, I think most readers would almost prefer that. At least I would, because there are so many times where I'm just I'm watching Batman, and he's refusing to kill the Joker because he's I don't kill people. But then the Joker gets away, and then he goes and kills more people, and Batman's we have to arrest him. And it's brother, just kill him. Please. just end it, man. This is getting out of hand. This is getting too crazy. And
the popularity of I don't kill people trope in superheroes is so funny to me, because I think sometimes it'd be better if they did kill them, because the way that Spider-Man and Batman fight people, they're crippled for life. They're not dead. They're just in a lot of pain.
Yeah. So I want to see some more people make decisions that are not just I don't kill people, because it's just we all understand that sometimes hard decisions need to be made.
Yeah. Moral compasses are such an interesting guiding thing for heroes too, because I think we all desire a moral compass, and we all kind of strive for one in different ways, whether it's through religion, through just personal beliefs and everything, and through family and everything like that. It's so interesting to have it in a character, because if you have a character so rigid in a moral compass, there's a lot of room for growth. And so I think that's where anti-heroes are fun, because they're not bad people necessarily, and they're put into really difficult situations where you can start to see them grow or choose to not grow, or whatever it is. But it's kind of an interesting, they're at the moment where they can grow.
I think you guys both brought up really excellent points. I think something to kind of keep in mind throughout this conversation is that moral compasses really embody a lot of the characteristics and qualities that we admire in characters. So when we're talking about anti-heroes, I feel like it illuminates the fact that at the end of the day, many of the values that we actually hold for ourselves personally conflict with each other, and And I think that we can admire characters who, you know, are sometimes at odds with even the things that they believe. Like, I think of Batman as an excellent example because he has like he operates kind of in this very morally gray area, but obviously he has this very like strict line of no killing. He identifies a lot with, you know, he's the shadow of humanity. He's like he is what humanity must always face. And then you look at, you know, his direct counterpart in Superman, you know, who represents, you know, the perfect immigrant story, like this, you know, the ability to have the utmost belief and in the light of humanity. I think there's admirable things about anti-heroes that we don't talk about enough.
So when we're talking about anti-heroes, specifically, what are some like good examples, or what are some of your guys' favorite examples of anti-heroes in both like literature and visual mediums such as television or like movies or TV shows?
I actually thought of one while we were talking that we didn't discuss earlier. And I gotta say, I really love several characters from The Last of Us as anti-heroes. I think both Joel and Ellie both showcase some really good anti-hero traits. And I'll talk about Joel specifically because I just like Joel as a character because he is a loner. I mean, like basically in the post-apocalyptic world, everyone kind of has to be an anti-hero because that's how you survive. But Joel, like, learning to like trust and like take care of Ellie, and then ultimately making decisions that will affect other people, probably negatively, but he does it because he cares about Ellie. Like, that's a pretty cool example, I think, of an anti-hero where it's like we can agree with his choice, but like at the end of the day, you can think about it like morally too. Like, does that choice affect other people negatively too? Which I think is a great. I think the best thing anti-heroes do is let us ask more questions.
The first of the actually one that came to mind that I researched a little bit more just because like one of my favorite motivations for antiheroes is revenge. I think it's just one of those things where it's like I personally have never never felt like that bloodthirsty like desire for revenge, you know, in a way where like even if someone's hurt me really badly, I just want to let it go. But there's something sometimes like empowering about certain like watching someone go through the process of looking to settle the score. So one of the examples that we were talking about in preparation for the episode was the Count of Monte Cristo. Like he's literally the revenge blueprint. Like it doesn't he manages to concoct this entire scheme in order to achieve his vision of revenge. Like and he will do it by any means necessary regardless of how long it takes. And so I think that sometimes that's an interesting concept that I see in some anti-heroes where it's like no matter how much time has passed, like, you know, the thing that they need to satisfy is their own pride. And I think that that's it's a human trait. Like it's something that I think a lot of people can identify with. But a lot of the time, like that's something that I really love about a good anti-hero is that you get it. Like you understand why they are the way they are.
I think trying to like find that understanding on like what affects people, what makes people anti-heroes is so interesting. A great example of this is Tyrion Lannister from the Game of Thrones. He he is the way that he is because of his environment. You know, he is like a man who is riddled with like vices and bitterness towards his family and his community because of like just the circumstances in which he grew up, right? And despite that, he often will like eventually end up making like a good choice. He wants to be a good person, but it feels like the world almost won't let him be one. And I really like that those kinds of anti-heroes who are like they're trying, but for whatever reason, it's just not working out for them. And it feels almost as though like the world has decided that they are going to be slotted into the villain role and is holding on to them in that position and won't let them out. I really like those kinds of anti-heroes.
I was just gonna say that, like, I think it's interesting the way what you bring up is that, like, I think a lot of anti-hero stories end in them kind of choosing to be more on one side than the other. Tyrion, at the end of the day, ends up on the quote unquote right side of history a little bit more than someone like Walter White.
Yeah.
Where we see him, and like Alicia and Drew had to talk me down because I did not see Walter White as an anti-hero. I really only saw him as a villain, but he was a decent person, a regular human, who was thrust in some really bad circumstances, health and with finances, and he made some bad choices, but kind of for the right reasons. And then we get to watch him spiral down, down, down until the very end, where you realize that this has all been building up to him choosing to be on the villainous side. He chooses a little bit more of himself rather than others. And that's another interesting spiral to watch too, because I think that's what's fun about antiheroes, that sometimes you don't know which side they're going to choose.
Well, and I think that highlights a really important aspect of antiheroes is that like desperation and temptation are two tools that will inevitably, even with like the most morally strong characters, will put them in a position where they may make choices that don't reflect that of like our most heroic of protagonists. I think about Captain America sometimes a lot in these kinds of discussions, because while he is very much like a traditional hero, I think that we don't always acknowledge that all heroes have like moral blind spots. We might think that Captain America doesn't lie, but he might if it means protecting someone that he loves. You know what I mean? So I think that it's important to acknowledge that like every single character will ultimately come to a point where they might not make a choice that's characteristic of them, but there's definitely purpose behind it. I think that anti-heroes just do a really great job at confronting the why.
I really like that, and I also really kind of want to go back to what you said with like, my gosh, how did you phrase it? You phrased it so well. Like they like often are like don't have a choice. Sometimes is that accurate?
Yeah, their temptation and desperation are going to put them in enough of a tough position that they're going to do whatever they've got to do to essentially tip the scales back to balance.
Yeah. So okay, perfect. So that reminds me actually of a business book written by Damon John. Do you guys know who Damon John is?
I have never heard of him.
He was on Shark Tank as one of the sharks, and he wrote a book called The Power of Broke. And in this book, he just talks about like how the only reason that he ever became who he is today is because he had no other option than to just like work. Or rather, he had nothing to lose. He was like, I'm already broke. I am already broke. I'm already struggling financially and emotionally and all these other things. What difference does it make if I fail? I mean, I'm literally already at the bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
We might as well just shoot for the stars and see what happens. I have nothing to lose. And so I wanted to talk about the aspect of having nothing to lose and like that, how that ties into antiheroes. Oftentimes we'll see antiheroes be like, you know what? Screw it. What could possibly go worse in my life right now anyways? And then they become like an antihero. Do you guys feel like there are like that's an aspect of some antiheroes, or am I crazy?
Oh, absolutely. I'm actually going to bring back an example that I talked about in our previous characters episode with Killmonger. Like, I look at him as a character and he literally lost everything. He had nothing going for him. So why not shoot for the top? You know what I mean? So I think about him as like a great example of like when you're just put in a position where it's been struggle after struggle after struggle. It's like, what have you got to lose except just going for what it is that you want, like what you envision as the answer to all of your problems. And so it's interesting to think about it that way, where like, I do like that perspective of like when you have an anti-hero who's in a position of like, I've got nothing left except to just do what I've got to do to get myself out.
I think about so Jack Sparrow has been coming to mind a lot as we've been talking, as like I know we talk about Deadpool being the ultimate anti-hero, but I kind of think Jack Sparrow is the ultimate anti-hero. He's kind of like a good guy who does everything for himself. But I think about like when he is stuck on his ship and he's gonna go down with it in like I think it's the second Pirates movie and the Kraken's eating it and he just jumps into the mouth of the Kraken, like his idea of like adventure being like the ultimate choice, um like even though his whole shtick is preserving himself and his longevity and his time and his ability to be free, um in that moment he looks at it and he says like something like the lines of like all right beastie, and then he jumps in like he realizes that like his choices like get to still be his choices. So I think that's what antiheroes are a lot of time. Some of the more free characters, they're not bound by morals or by sometimes not even by vengeance. They get to choose how they want to do it. They get to plan and they get to attack and they get to defend who they want to defend.
Hey Redder friends, quick pause from the storytelling spiral to say, if you're loving the Word Builders, come be a part of the chaos beyond the mic. We're hanging out on Instagram and YouTube at The Word Builders, sharing behind-the-scenes bits, writing prompts, and very questionable memes about the writing process. Tell us your favorite hot mess, drop your ride or die anti-hero in the comments wherever you're listening. So, hit follow, drop a comment, and let us know what you're building. We're probably cheering you on in the replies. Alright, back to the episode.
I kind of have like a way to shift the conversation ever so slightly. Something that I know that we want to get into a little bit deeper later down the road is talking a little bit more about redemption arcs. But I want to ask you guys a question. Do you guys think that in order for an anti-hero to be like truly loved and admired for everything that they've like that they do, within their story, do you think that they need to have a redemption arc?
I don't know. I have some hot takes about redemption arcs, right? Especially because I spend a big hobby of mine is gaming, and I up until recently played a lot of World of Warcraft, and in that game there is a character who is like the leader of one of the factions. And she goes and does something just completely horrible. She is a deeply like selfish character who is using the people in her faction to achieve her own selfish goals. And she goes and does something like heinous on the border of like attempted genocide. And then like not even 2 years later, they tried to give her a redemption arc. Basically they were just like, oh, actually it turned out that she was like mind controlled this whole time or whatever, and we were like, no, she wasn't. Don't give me that. And I think redemption arcs are good. However, most modern writing I don't think do them very well, because redemption arcs take time. In order to do a true redemption arc of like somebody, an anti-hero who did go off the deep end a little bit, like basically what's happened there is you've lost trust with your other characters in your story. Trust in the real world is not just gained back overnight. It's something that is worked towards and that you earn back little by little. So I think when we talk about redemption arcs with anti-heroes, I think they can be done well. They just have to be done tactfully, and it can't just be like, oh, you did this like one good thing one time, or you actually had like this really good excuse that nobody knew about the whole time. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with redemption arcs most of the time, because most of them are not written very well.
Yeah, we'll definitely delve more into redemption arcs, I think, as in the future, because it's such a broad, interesting topic. As for anti-heroes with redemption arcs, I think redemption arcs are done best when somebody already has some kind of strong feeling about one side or the other, and then having to return to the light. Where redemption arcs, when it comes to anti-heroes, I don't think are 100% necessary. I think they can be done well with anti-heroes, especially when it comes to what their ideal life looks like and trying to get back to that ideal life or trying to make their life better in some way. But I don't think they're necessarily like necessary in order to have a good kind of anti-hero experience. Because that's really what at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? It's like you're having this kind of experience. You're watching this person who's like likable in some regard, whether it's, Deadpool making quips or Jack Sparrow being silly or I guess Walter White making meth. It's some kind of like entertainment you gain from the anti-hero, and you're willing to look past some of their questionable choices because you like them as people.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
There was one, I mean, because I've been thinking about this since I asked the question, of like, there have been some really great examples, I think, of antiheroes that are sometimes just liked because of popularity. Like, we've watched Cars an unbelievable number of times.
oh my goodness.
And every time I just think about the fact that how well liked Lightning is at the beginning, even though, like, because we see his dialogue the entirety, of the film, that he's not a likable person, but he's famous for what he does, and he's talented, and those are all things that everyone admires in him. And so sometimes that, like, and the fact that he does incrementally earn the trust of the people around him, and you watch as he learns bit by bit how to be a good person. But I also think of like specific examples of just like anti-heroes that don't get redemption arcs and actually just completely spiral. Walter White's a great example, but one that actually came to mind was Light from Death Note.
Oh,
because
that's good.
I just think about the fact that like when he first gets possession of the book, he first sets out with writing down the names of criminals and people that he does like that he like deems as evil, but eventually this completely spirals out of control into a god complex. And so I think about like how sometimes they take it to the extreme where they are now no longer redeemable. But even if it starts out for, reasons that you could probably look at it and just say, that's not, I don't know, like you can always like, there's a little bit of removal for you as the person, reading or watching or whatever the case might be, where it's like, I don't know if I could do that, but I'm glad that this person is,
I think another great example of somebody who starts off with like, we're just gonna only like use our powers to defeat bad guys is Venom. And
Yep.
my I guess my question to you guys is, because eventually a lot of these heroes like spiral out of control. Like there is a scene in Venom, right, where like they decide, hey, we're only gonna eat bad guys, yada yada yada. And then like the next movie, Venom just like eats the head of like one of the bodyguards around to the facility or something. And it's like, yo, that guy, like he's working there for like $25 an hour, bro. He's clearly like not a bad guy. Does he work for somebody that's bad? Sure. Is that specific guard a bad guy? Probably not. And so I guess my question is, how do you, as a writer, define what your character considers evil? And like, who decides that?
First off, I gotta.
Yeah, so I think like because I try to write multiple strong characters, something that we have to understand, and that we should embrace as writers, is that every single individual has different ideas of right and wrong. So I try not to specifically determine like, oh, this is bad or this is good. And I try to stay away from those things because, especially when you're looking at like conflicts like between characters, most of the time, even if someone isn't really doing something bad, there could be someone that just vehemently disagrees with it for whatever reason. So I will give like a pretty generic example. So like, say you have a character that is wanting to, I mean, a common one in the romance genre is like, oh, I'll do best friend's brother, okay?
Oh,
So, oh wait, Kissing Booth. What one was that one? So, say you have these two best friends, and one of them believes like one of them wants to go for this guy, and is like the quote unquote dream for this person, even though as the friend, their friend is thinking to themselves, you deserve so much better, and you would change everything about yourself, all the things that someone like would really truly admire about you, just to get the guy. I think that that's part of what makes really compelling characters in general is when they don't always agree on this is what's right, this is what's wrong. I think I really admire I mean some incredible examples that we have often revolve around superheroes. Like we look at Batman and Superman. We look at Captain America and Iron Man. Just as like two really like good examples of you can have a really strong moral compass, but go about it in completely different ways. You know, I think of, I guess to just extrapolate a little bit more on the difference between Batman and Superman, like they have, like, they ultimately want to help people. They want to get the bad guys off the street, but they look at the world through two completely separate lenses. And so, even if realistically they might do the same thing, like save the right person, get rid of like the wrong person, in or the bad guys in these situations, like they'll never agree on what the correct thing to do is. And so I think as a writer, for me, it's more important that like the overall meaning is extrapolated from whatever situation I'm trying to explain or circumstance I'm putting my characters in, and that there's an overall understanding of this is why this person is doing it, but here's the other perspectives that are going on that might differentiate from, you know, the person who's actually central to the issue.
I think how characters react can tell a lot about who they are and what their what is defined as right and wrong too. How somebody might react, like how one of my own characters might react to somebody getting hurt. Like I have one character who might say, like, who might rush to get help. I have another character who might say suck it up, and you know,
Rub some dirt in
he's
it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's like, you want to know how I got these scars, you know, that kind of thing. Actually, you know, it's actually a good example. That is another movie that our son has us watch quite often is Finding Nemo. And when Nemo's like, I have a bad fin, I can't get out of this like tube kind of thing. Gil says like, never stopped me. Like, you know, like I have a bad fin, doesn't stop me. So I think how characters can react can tell you a lot about their own moral compasses, and also I think their own intentions and their motivations too. Because like somebody says that it can be seen as callous, but it can also be seen as you can grow past this. Mm-hmm. I think that's what a lot of times these anti-heroes do, is that they see the world in gray and they're okay with it being gray, and they can do good and bad things to keep that balance for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think my next question then is, when you're writing these anti-heroes, how do you decide when they're going to make a selfish decision versus when they're going to make like a generally considered good decision?
See, this is where I think the beauty of anti-heroes lies, is that if you can do it right, you'll never know whether or not it's a selfish decision or if it's the right decision. Mm-hmm. I think about like end of like the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie when Jack stabs the heart of Davy Jones to save Will, because like that was his whole goal, was to get out of like that, but he didn't want to be tied to the Dutchman, the Flying Dutchman. So he saves Will's life by getting what he wants, and so it's like everything you're like, if you like look back, like, oh, okay, this was all for Jack at the end, but also it's kind of for other people too. So I think that's, for me, I think it's super fun to just play with like choices in that sense and say, this is going to be in character, and things around it will shift, but like at the end of the day, they're always making the choice for themselves or for their ideal world.
It's funny because I think I would 100% agree. I think the way that the consequences play out is 100% telling. So I think ultimately, I think less about whether the choice that an anti-hero makes is a selfish one or one that serves others or whatever the case might be. I think the consequences are going to say everything that it needs to do about the situation. Because like, I mean, to continue with that, you know, perspective, the movie focused on the fact that he saved Will, it would paint a very different picture than if we hadn't gone into it with all of the prior knowledge of everything that Jack would have to do to get what he wants. I think, like, what's crazy about being a writer and the way that you, like, kind of the control that you have over these situations is that you can literally paint whatever picture it is that you want, and you can also paint it a billion different ways that, like, is always going to be a surprise. So I think that's also something that I do as a writer is I also want to be surprised by what my characters do, but I have to make it make sense. So I think that that's probably the biggest thing is I probably think less about the choice that they're going to make and more so about what is it that I really, like, as a reader would want, or what's something that I would hate but I can justify.
Well, something that I could hate but I could justify is so good. Like, what can I, like, how far along the line, or like how much can I push the envelope before my readers are like, okay, I'm not reading this anymore?
Right.
I think that actually it sounds like it's a moral issue, but I think it ends up being a character issue. If the character would make that choice, even if it's a terrible choice, like as long as the character, like the readers believe that the character could make that choice, I think that is the correct choice.
I actually want to talk about this for a sec because I definitely so obviously Max and I have talked about our experiences playing D&D, and there were so many times literally I'd be sitting with this party, and mind you, I love the boys. Like I've loved each of the guys that we've played with. I loathe some of the choices that their characters make. It drives me absolutely crazy. And a big part of that is like just because it ultimately ends up putting us all in a horrible situation, you know, and part of that is like that's the goal. Like it's through conflict that we get to the exciting parts of stories. I guess my question for you guys is, has there ever been a situation where you've just like been deeply unhappy with the choice a character made, but then by the time you got to the end of whether it was a story you were writing or story you're reading or watching, where you're like, okay, I still really hated that, but it's okay now?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, heroes can make like bad choices, right? I think just a great example of that is just anytime that a hero makes a decision and then there ends up being real serious consequences. You know, they're put in charge of a team and they make a decision that accidentally ends up getting like one of their team members killed or something like that. Like those kinds of consequences are the consequences that, while they suck because I might be attached to that side character, it still is nice to know that like the author cares enough about these characters to give them real consequences to their decisions.
I definitely think that characters can make choices though that just are not in line with who they are. And that's kind of what like defines the anti-hero is that like in the hero and the villain is that they kind of have this code at the end of the day. Like everyone's got their code, whether it's themselves or for others. And sometimes they break that code in like an unsatisfying way. And I think like the major example for me is like Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy. Just makes no sense. And Mark Hamill's actually described it. He said that he's actually playing Jake Skywalker, not Luke, because Luke would never make those choices. um, but like Luke, like deciding that he messed up as a teacher for his nephew so bad that he had to just straight up like almost kill his nephew. That's a terrible. Like Luke would never make that choice. Like,
Yeah.
and then he puts himself into exile because of his. He's so upset about what he did, or whatever, or you know what his nephew ended up doing. It's like, it's just so like not his character, and I think that's where an anti-hero has to stay. Like if you try to start pushing your anti-hero to be more heroic or be more villainous, like you have to commit to that. Like you have to have that like to show that trajectory. Walter White being like the prime example of that of him. He is like slowly descending until it's like at the end, like you kind of don't even have pity for him for what happens at the end because he made those choices that led him there. But if it was like a sudden turn, all of a sudden he was philanthropic or like really a good guy all of a sudden, like you would never like think that like that was the correct choice for the character, even though it's the morally nice choice. You have to like let the story tell, like the story has to follow like a line that like makes sense.
Okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here because I think that this is something that fascinates me as a writer. What is it about like being a fan of a character that makes you think that you know the character better than the author?
Okay. There are definitely some moments where I have been reading or I've been watching a show and I'm like, okay, that character would never make that decision. And I understand that like the definition of humanity basically is like the fight between like light and darkness inside each of us, and that fight lasts our entire lives. I get that. People make good decisions, people make bad decisions. Writers can also make bad decisions, especially TV show writers when it's like an adaptation and they're trying to like put their own spin on it.
And they got deadlines and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's kind of the goal of writing at the end of the day too, is that if you can get your readers to understand the characters to the point where they can say this was not the correct decision for the character, that I think is a good goal a lot of the time. Like, yeah, like sometimes you just make choices as a writer. You're like, people may not agree with this, but this is the right decision for the character for where. But I think that's at the end of the day, like you as a writer have a bigger picture than the reader might, than a fan of a character might. One of our favorite TV shows is called Castle. Drew, have we talked about this with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I think we even mentioned on the podcast, but at the very beginning of the show, like the whole premise is that like he needs a new character for a new book series because he kills off his main his golden goose, his prize pony at the very beginning. Like his big character he's had for dozens of books like finally dies at the end of the last book, like, and that's like and everyone asks him like, oh, you wrote Derek Storm, why'd you kill him? Like that's what everyone asks, like, why'd you kill him, like, but that's because like I think people like the character, and I think if you can make a character that people like, people enjoy, and then like as long as you're making choices that help the character grow, sometimes I think what can happen is that people will try and make certain events happen in books rather than certain character growth moments happen. And then they'll force their characters through, square peg through a round hole kind of thing. Trying to get them to a certain point rather than, helping the character to move to that moment in a more natural way.
I mean, I think something that I've been thinking about as I opened up this can of worms is, are both of you familiar with Stephen King's Misery?
No.
I'm not, no.
Excellent. Okay, so basically the whole premise of Misery is that it's about a novelist, Paul, who ends up being rescued from this really serious car accident by a nurse who lives out in the boonies, When he wakes up, both of his legs are broken, and she's essentially nursing him back to health. And she's his biggest fan. Like, she's obsessed with this series of books that he writes.
Oh, I actually have heard of this. I didn't know it was called Misery, but continue.
However, what ultimately ends up happening is that her obsession takes a really dark turn. So she finds out, because he's just releasing a book, and she finds out that he's killing off her favorite character. And so all of a sudden, he's now in a position where he can't leave. And she tortures him into rewriting the story. And so, like, obviously this is a very extreme example.
Yeah.
Of, like, this woman thinks the world of this fictional character. And he's now forced into a situation where he has no choice but to rewrite the character. I mean, I also think about in a more lighthearted way, when the world came together and bullied, was it Sony?
I don't know. Whoever made Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
The world really came together in that moment and said, dude, Sonic looks ugly. You need to redo it. Just like the fact that there are just times where, like, we as readers, as consumers of characters, like, get sometimes overly obsessed with what we think the trajectory of a character should be. So for you guys, how much, or do you guys find yourselves having to remind yourselves to respect the author and their decision when it comes to a character versus what you think should be happening?
I feel like a lot of the time it's a trust the process kind of feeling with authors. Because if they, you're reading halfway through a book, you're like, oh, like this is a weird decision, or I don't know where it's gonna go. You kind of have to feel like you're trusting the process. I feel like the question comes after you've read the book and say, yeah, this is not as good as I thought, or this, I don't think I would have made this decision. I think that's for me where it has to go. Like I have to trust the author. At the end, I can make a kind of decision whether or not I like the choices they made. I don't think I often come to the conclusion that they made the wrong choices for the characters. I just think I sometimes don't like the way things ended up. But that might not have anything to do with the character.
Okay. So I have a good example for this actually. In the book series Fablehaven by Brandon Mull. It's a YA series. Seth, one of the main characters, spoilers by the way, if you want to read it, skip ahead. Seth makes friends with this demon that's dying. And eventually this demon, like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, decides to become like his patron and turns Seth into like a pseudo warlock. And this demon, while like he says some like weird, sketchy stuff, seems to be like, as he's approaching death, he seems to be like turning a new leaf. And I, as a reader, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, because this is a character who is like thousands of years old and has made the wrong decision for all of that time and met this one kid, and this kid's changing his mind. Like, how sweet is this? And then they something happens where Seth is tricked by the demon into using an artifact to heal him, and the demon gets healed and he dips, and then he goes and does like a bunch of horrible things. And I remember being like so disappointed because I wanted that character to be good. But then I go back and I think about it, and the entire interaction, the demon is consistently telling Seth, hey, by the way, you probably shouldn't trust me. You probably shouldn't do all of these things. And for whatever reason, as a reader, I just totally like blocked all of that dialogue out and only took the things that he did that I wanted him to do as like who the character is. Even though the demon is like telling Seth the whole time, hey, just, like maybe don't listen to me all the time. Maybe don't do all of these nice things for me, because if I was full health, I'd probably eat you. But like as a reader, I was just like, nah, he's not gonna do any of that. And I don't know, I was just like gaslighting myself into thinking that this character, it was gonna end up being a good character, when in reality that never ended up happening. But
it's so funny because I relate to this with ACOTAR. I've been waiting to bring this up literally the entire episode. Because I'll also get to talk about it when we talk a little bit about promises and payoffs. But something that I had to realize about the main character, Feyre, in ACOTAR is, in the first book, I feel like she was very much like a very reluctant heroine, which we do see like occasionally that, they're not like your traditional hero, but they have a duty. And so sometimes they have a duty to uphold. From The Last of Us also falls into this category. Like he just has to step up, because if he doesn't, either nothing's going to get done or it's all going to fall apart. And so I definitely identify with Feyre. I don't want to spoil any of it, Drew, because the hope is that you'll read it.
Okay.
Like throughout the first book, a lot of what she does, like, are rooted in her sense of duty and protection, especially of her family. However, from like in book 2, because of or a lot of the things that transpire at the end of book 1, she begins to make choices based on what feels right to her. Which is where you start to see this flip from heroine to anti-heroine. So it's really interesting when you watch that change occur. And throughout the rest of the series, she just continues to make these really complex choices. But ultimately, you admire her for making these difficult choices in order to protect her people, like the people that she cares about. It's just interesting to kind of watch that. It's funny because it's like you watch her grow, but it's almost like she's growing in the opposite direction of what you would think is something to admire. But like that's why I love that series so much, is just she's one character that this is happening for, but there's other characters throughout the book that you look at and you're like, oh my gosh, I hate this person. Oh my gosh, I love this person. So eventually you'll read about Tamlin, and I'm so excited for you to dive into that.
Okay.
So if this is incentive, this is big incentive.
Wait.
Anyway, this actually whole episode has been a setup. Drew, you're gonna read A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yeah, I was about to say. I was like, hold on. I feel like this whole episode is just the smoke and mirrors to get me to read ACOTAR. Oh my gosh.
I hope when your wife listens, she's like, "See, this is someone coming to bat for us."
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I feel like we've gotten a ton out of this topic, and we'll definitely continue to have more character episodes to talk about things like heroes and villains and redemption arcs in the future too. Let's get on to our weekly word count. How did we do this week, word builders? Maybe we should just have Leisha do her word count, and then we just leave it at that. Sound good?
I wrote a little bit.
I wrote a little bit. Oh.
What are your numbers?
Okay, fine. 549. Next.
304.
Sorry. 304. Hey! We wrote a little bit. Life's been interesting lately, so.
I truly don't have an excuse this week. Like I just got to the end of the day and I was just so burnt out on work. Work has been so crazy that I just was like, I don't know. The thought of writing was a bit daunting this week, to say the least.
That's fair. I was struggling because I am introducing my secondary character, my partner to my main character, and so I was having a hard time making sure that her introduction would sound good. And should I have spent so much time thinking about that and generating images of the characters? No, but
I think I'm gonna try something this week to help me write. I think I'm gonna try to do like a voice memo that I can then transcribe.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right, Leisha's the winner for this week. What'd you get?
3,250 words.
Ooh, that's a wait. Hold on. Beautiful.
Wow,
oh my gosh.
That's more than I thought.
I just finally got into it. I had done a lot of timelines the week before, and so I was like, you know what? I just need to start getting into it. So it's helped me kind of flesh out a little bit more of the character interactions, and that's easy to write for me. So I lucked out.
All right, Drew, we're gonna show up next week.
Yeah, no, we're showing up next week for sure.
Okay.
If I don't
Right.
listen. If I have less than 4 digits, I'm quitting the podcast.
No,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Exactly 1,000 words.
We need to start implementing like a punishment though. If you get like less than 4 digits or something, you've got to go spend 24 hours in a Denny's and you have to vlog the whole thing. I don't know.
If you have any ideas out there in listener land for punishments for us for failing the weekly word count or being last place, something like that, Let us know.
Being
Comments,
last place
replies.
is okay. All right. If we're about to start doing like punishments for real, I'm gonna lock in. I'm gonna start right.
I'm not stressed.
yeah. I'm not stressed at all.
Okay.
All right, Drew. It's a fight for second.
I know we're just gonna be fighting for second place. All right.
That's a wrap on today's chapter. Whether you're building kingdoms, cozy kitchens, or characters worth rooting for, keep writing, and we'll see you next time in the story.